This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
Hey, baby, there he is. Ira Winderman, how you feeling, my friend? You feeling good?
I'm feeling good. You know, sunny days. You can see outside my window here in Chicago with 33 degrees. This is spring.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is, listen, in 50 years, the earth will be a little warmer. So those winters there in Chicago when you travel won't be so bad 50 years from now, Ira.
Oh, no, I'll be at the
And
beach
you're on
in
your
Lake
80th
Michigan
year
50
on the
years.
beach.
Yeah, I'll be in a Speedo at Lake Michigan 50 years from now. Now, I'll also be well into my hundreds, but that's another story.
What's wrong? 80-something years on the beach? There's nothing wrong with that. You can pull it off, Ira. I mean, come on.
Hope so. I'm looking forward to my 84th year on the beach.
Yeah, there's only another 50 years left. Come on, you got plenty of time. You'll make it with no problem. Last night, that was fun, I gotta say. Nets and Bucks. And by the way, I had no problem with the flagrant foul. He never went for the ball, and Bruce Brown could have gotten, seriously injured on that one. Some people were having a problem with that flagrant call. I had none.
Big O, I was for one reason. Bruce Brown slowed down to try to get the and one, which is a savvy move, and I understand.
Okay.
But I think as you get older, you also learn the position you can put yourself in. So if Bruce Brown just went for the layup, there was no foul because Middleton wouldn't have caught him. But once you slow down, it's if you're almost backwardsly initiating the contact. You're saying, I want you to ride up my back. And he did. He just didn't want him to rip his arm out of the socket and fling him to the floor. But I think Middleton got caught in that position. He's not that kind of player.
No,
I thought the fairest thing in that situation would have been a flagrant one, since it did look like the game was going to continue on. So I thought that was a little bit severe there. It was a very dangerous play. But I also think that the protagonist wasn't fully responsible. I think, sometimes you put yourself in positions where things can look worse.
It doesn't mean you should. It doesn't mean that if you're the violator, you go ahead and commit the worst violation that you could have, instead of just hammering him, bumping him, whatever. But once you hook him down like that, you got him completely out of balance, and he could have gotten, injured. So grab him, do something, foul him. You're going to foul him anyways, right?
Right.
But don't foul him and put him in a position where he could get hurt. How many guys have we ever seen slow down and get run over all the freaking time, dude? I mean, come on. And we've watched guys that were getting run over actually lift the guy up off the ground, at times, and put him in a difficult position after he's getting run over too. So kind of goes both ways.
Yeah, you know what? But it was really intense, and you watch that game from a Heat perspective, and you go, I don't want to play either of these teams very early in the playoffs. Oh my God! I mean, it's funny because I was watching a couple of games. I had that on the TNT coverage. I was watching the Sixers on my computer. Absolutely crap the bed against Detroit.
The flip side of the Nets and the Bucks, by the way. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
If I was re-ranking the East, the top four right now, I would have Philadelphia dropping to 4. Because this whole Harden in the clutch thing is not going away, Big O. It's real. It's there. He's not the guy. And even Doc Rivers after the game, people might have read this the wrong way. He wasn't blaming his bench, but he was basically saying, that's on James Harden. He was playing with our reserves. When Joel is off the floor, he's the guy we want on the floor to get stuff done, and he wasn't getting it done. I'm really curious to see this final week, how it plays out for the Sixers, whether they regain their stride, whether they drop to number 4. But again, you drop to number 4, you're in better shape. You're playing the Bulls, who struggled to just beat the Clippers in overtime last night. You wind up at 1 or 2, you're going to wind up with the Nets, one of those two. And Big O, you and I now on our Acura Pembroke Pines reports for months have been going back and forth on this. But that's not a matchup against the Nets you won in the first round. You're going to have to score hell of a lot of points. I don't know if he'd have hell of a lot of points in their vocabulary.
No, I get what you're saying, but they also have a hell of a defense that they can play more than any other team.
And they did against Boston. And they suffocated the life out of Tatum and Brown at moments of truth, and even Smart at moments of truth in Boston. So, you know what? The one thing I like mostly about what happened this week is how the East showed it's playing the best basketball. Because last night we watched another craptastic. Thank you, TNT, for showing the Lakers again. I was worried they wouldn't be on, that it wouldn't be the Knicks or the Lakers. But man, this ball in the East this year, Heat, Celtics, Bucks, emerging Nets, even Toronto and what they've done, there's some really good basketball in the East this year.
By the way, before I forget, It's not only the clutch thing with James Harden. If Philadelphia fails down the stretch, it'll be Doc Rivers also carrying that burden
it's
too.
always Doc Rivers.
Okay.
I think he's a good coach. I don't think he's in the pantheon of coaches like some have put them. Interesting how people have always talked about the Phil Jacksons and the Eric Spoelstras. Well, yeah, great players and they won. Doc had that 1 year when it was brought together by Danny Ainge for him with Garnett and Pierce and Ray Allen close to their primes, and he rode that. But outside of that, tell me Doc Rivers' second best season might have been getting a bad Orlando Magic team to finish 500 when he won Coach of the Year that year. If that's the second best season on your resume, I think in the pantheon, a lot of other much better coaches have been overlooked.
I'll take it a step further.
Sure.
I think Danny Ainge and Doc Rivers need to buy Kevin McHale a steak dinner at his favorite steakhouse any night of the year for the rest of his life.
For the Garnett trade.
Because if it wasn't for Garnett, that's the one thing that's not only made Doc Rivers, it's also made Danny Ainge.
And I get that.
Neither guy has accomplished jack crap since that.
Well, I don't know if I'd agree as strongly on the Danny Ainge part. Look, just for people who weren't aware, Kevin McHale at the time was
after that. It's been underachieving since then. I mean, it never lived up to all the hype of all the picks and all the trades.
It might have been from a coaching and results and a Brad Stevens overrated standpoint. Just for people who aren't as familiar, Kevin McHale was working with the Timberwolves. He was the one who acquiesced and took nothing from Boston in exchange for Garnett. But you know what? Danny Ainge did trade for Ray Allen. He did wind up getting him. He did get really good draft choices in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and even Marcus Smart and some of what they've done. They've had the talent. So I think if you're going to say we're going to do team ratings, I would rate the Boston front office as pretty strong. I think they've done a very decent job. Look at the way they hoodwinked the Sixers in the Markelle Fultz deal to get rid of him, get a better draft position, a better draft result than them. So I think Danny Ainge not nearly as culpable as some of the other things that went on in Boston. But Boston perennially has been the team that's been 1 year away. And it looks like they'll be 1 year away again this year.
By the way, not only did somebody nail it with Strus, that should be starting, but I don't know, Ira, I think 2 years ago, somebody told you Robert Williams is the Celtics' best center. I don't know. Somebody was telling you that. I don't know. In one of our discussions. I don't know.
And that, folks, is why you got to give up the terrestrial radio because you've got to plug in your Ethernet cord and you're going to get the real truth there. Look, you know what, Big O, I always take the long view. I know you come on, you're on 7 days a week. Matter of fact, even when the show's over, you're driving your family crazy with your sports talk. But it's been 2 games of Max Strus, and it's been 2 good games of Max Strus, and he's done a lot of good things, and Duncan had been struggling. I get all that. But again, just like you and I were talking about Doc Rivers and Danny Ainge, the playoffs will tell us this. And if Max Strus is a playoff player, God bless him. And if Max Strus isn't a playoff player, then you can't overstate the change also.
But you have to say he looks more like a Heat player. That block at the end of the game, that's not what you ever get from Duncan. You're not going to get 2 blocks and 3 steals.
Absolutely. And yet I'm going to throw something back in your face.
By the way, one more thing. Sure. I've been saying this all week. Duncan is better suited because now, since he's a crappy defender, he now gets to face second team
offensive players.
Second-teamers are covering him. So maybe him and Tyler can actually be a dynamic offensive duo off the bench and become one hell of a spark where Strus sets the table Heat style offensively and defensively.
But let me ask you this, Notre Dame Zagari. If Caleb Martin was available in Boston or is available tomorrow here in Chicago, Sunday in Toronto.
I love him.
Don't you think he would have been the player on the floor instead of Max Strus?
I have no problem with that. I have zero issue with that. At least I can live with Caleb. You know that because he's an all-around player. He's a Heat player. He's an offensive and a defensive-minded player. So if you want to put him out there, I totally understand it because it gives you another ball handler, another creator on top of all of that, besides being a three-point shooter, a defender, and a scorer, just like Strus is. So I'm with you there. I can live with that logic. I can't live with the logic of Duncan Robinson, and we're waiting, a Ryan Tannehill-like in a NBA season to make the changes. 7 years or 70 something games. Enough already, bro. Let's move on. Duncan
Well,
had
so far so good, but you know what? There have been 2 games and just one real test against Boston. Tomorrow here in Chicago, Bulls, real test. Sunday, second night of back-to-back in Toronto, real test. And honestly, even next week, Big O, Charlotte is desperate for victory to avoid having to play the double play-in. That'll be a test at FTX Arena on Tuesday. Atlanta, the exact same situation. Trae Young has been fantastic in the last 2 weeks. That's Friday at FTX Arena. So, you know what? For all the people who don't get it, who go, oh, NBA regular season, who cares? Wait for the playoffs. I'll agree that NBA regular season in mid-December, early January, yep, you can skip it. You can take the wife to the movies. Every remaining Heat game, including a week from Sunday in Orlando, because of seeding, the Heat now have 5 meaningful games to the finish line, especially just with a half-game lead on the Milwaukee Bucks in the Eastern Conference.
Follow him on Twitter, by the way, at Ira Heatbeat, and catch his work there at the South Florida Sun Sentinel. How are we doing on injuries tonight?
Well, it's tomorrow night in Chicago. It almost was in Boston tonight when all 15 players on the Heat standard roster were healthy until Caleb Martin, Eric Spoelstra said at the last minute because of the calf bruise, want to play it safe with him. So there's a chance that tomorrow's game here in Chicago, maybe Sunday's game in Toronto, you might have a completely healthy Heat roster, which for Heat Nation and Heat fan and Heat broadcaster is all well and good, but it just compounds the issues for Eric Spoelstra. And I kind of like what he did. I thought it was cold, might have even been cruel, but he told Victor Oladipo and Markieff Morris, the train don't stop no more. We're not stopping at Rehab Junction. This thing has got to go full speed ahead right now. You know, this is go time. So they were left aside. Duncan Robinson had to deal with being a reserve. Very interestingly, on the social media of both Markieff and of Victor Oladipo, they posted cryptic messages. One was Markieff that was basically saying same old, as if he's being overlooked. Today, Victor Oladipo on his Twitter said, I could still do this, and showed some of his career highlights. It's just really interesting, the subtexting of a Hall of Fame level coach or subtweeting of like Eric Spoelstra. They could be all smiles at practice. They could say all the right thing. As you know, players want to play. So this is not easy for Eric Spoelstra, but he's doing right by the players who matter the most. Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry. Everyone else is a supporting piece and no more.
By the way, not that I believe this is going to sustain itself in any way, stretch, or form, but what drugs are Jimmy Butler? What drugs is Jimmy Butler taking to be able to see the 3 from the arc? Because he's actually making some of them. What the hell is going on?
Well, you know what? And that's good and bad. I mean, look, you're the same as me.
Yeah,
you lined up the 3. You're like this.
It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing.
No, you're like, no, good shot. But in the long run, I want him drawing fouls. I want him playing the post. I want him closer to the basket. Now, if he thinks that he can mix it enough and draw the defender out, okay, we'll give him that much also. I also think it could be a sign of fatigue. That I know he's missed a lot of time. But still, after 60 games or so, getting ready for the playoffs, maybe he doesn't want to push that hard in these games because starting April 16th, the games will matter more. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a little bit of exploration. I think it's also a little bit of sort of trying to give himself a brief rest while also playing.
What are you working on the Sun Sentinel so folks can get ready for Bulls and Heat tomorrow night, my friend?
Well, I know it's something you don't want to hear about. Most Heat fans don't want to hear about. Governor DeSantis doesn't want to hear about. But there is another Omicron variant out there.
No.
So all of a sudden now we're like wondering what happens again with the NBA. And the reason I bring it up, and I wrote a story about this, to get into Toronto on Sunday is fine. Canada has no restrictions. To get back out, the players will have to test their walkthrough on Sunday. And so I was asking Bam, like, what would it be like? You go through all of this, and now you have this almost random test to get back in your country. And his whole thought was, stay positive, test negative.
There you go. I like it. Follow him on Twitter at Ira Heatbeat and catch him 3 times a week here, giving you all the information you can handle on the Miami Heat. Ira, thank you. Have a fantastic weekend.
And looking forward to our Acura Pembroke Pines report on Monday. That'll be after the Bulls game. After the Raptors game, we'll have plenty to talk about. Thank you, Big O.
Thank you, sir. There you go. Ira Winderman, you are now on the Heat Beat.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.